Hello, my name is Vivian French, and I've written a book called The Steam Whistle Theatre Company. And it's about a group of travelling players who leave London and they go north. And in their repertoire is King Lear. And one of the reasons why I wrote this story is because a very long time ago I was an actor and I used to tour with a theatre company that did a version of Midsummer Night's Dream. And I began to think about all the different versions of Shakespeare that have happened over the years. And sometimes you can learn a lot about the actual plays as they were written by Shakespeare by looking at what people altered and thinking about why they altered them. And the Victorians were particularly keen on doing just that. They had a version of Romeo and Juliet where it all ended happily and they went off together into the sunset to live happily ever after. And when I came to write this story, I thought, well, if I set it in round about 1888, that would be really almost one of the prime times when people were rewriting Shakespeare. And the play that I thought I could have my characters particularly involved with was King Lear. And one of the reasons why there were so many versions during the 19th century is because, rather curiously, of the advent of the trains. The first commercially successful train was about 1812, and by the middle of the 19th century, at about 1845 or so, there was railway track all over the British Isles. And this made an enormous difference to small theatre companies because instead of having to travel with a horse and cart, they could put all their belongings onto a train and they could travel much, much further. And this really opened things up for them. So that there were companies like mine, the Pringle family players, who were able to leave London and head north. And so this was really intriguing. So I thought I would use that as a basis of a story about Shakespeare. And it occurred to me that, of course, in the 19th century, a lot of people wouldn't have actually come across Shakespeare. So I thought I would have an introduction. And the story is about the Pringle family, and that's Ma and Pa and Rosie and Charlie, and then the other members of the company. And they go north and they find lodgings at Uncaster Hall, which is owned by somebody who's not got a great deal of money. And there's a kitchen maid called Edie. And I thought that it would be a good way of explaining about Shakespeare to have Edie not really know who he was. So Edie is talking to Charlie, who's one of the young players, and she says, "Do you do magic too?" Charlie looked shocked. "We're a theatre company. We do plays, Shakespeare, and lots of other things." He saw Edie's puzzled expression. "You do know who Shakespeare is, don't you?" "Is he the guy you calls Pa?" Edie asked. "Or the other one, the one with no teeth?" "Shakespeare lived ages and ages ago," Rosie explained, "and he wrote lots of plays. Pa rewrites bits sometimes, but he keeps the stories the same. Well, almost." Edie was still puzzled. "If he's dead, why does he do his plays?" Charlie jumped onto a step and threw out his arms in imitation of Pa Pringle. "Shakespeare," he boomed, "was the finest playwright who ever lived, and his words live on and on in the mouths of the Steam Whistle Theatre Company." "On and on and on," Rosie agreed. "Pa's always quoting them. Ma says it's difficult to get him to talk proper English." "Proper English?" Charlie slapped his forehead in mock horror. "The words of our noble bard are far more proper than any we have nowadays, fair lady." So I was explaining how people would think that actually Shakespeare might be totally unknown to them. And when it comes to the actual play that they perform, they do King Lear, and they do a version of King Lear that they feel is more suitable to Ancaster, which is this town that they've gone to. Incidentally, Ancaster doesn't actually exist. I made it up because if you're writing a book and you've got a real place, people write you letters saying you've got the geography wrong, so I invented it. So they're thinking about what they're going to perform for their very, very first show in Ancaster. And Pa says, Pa is absolutely determined that they're going to do King Lear. He says, "Let vaulting ambition carry us ever onwards. Throw your hearts over the windmill. Sing to the sun, and all will be well." Aunt Mags turned her back on Pa and gave Gertie a searching look. "So you don't think King Lear is right for Ancaster?" "I don't know," Gertie shrugged. "Like my song, and that's a silly, sentimental little piece. I'd say we'd maybe be best doing something simpler than Shakespeare, at least to start off with." Pa was appalled. "No, no, no. We must shoot for the stars." "Mrs. Poskett's found a lovely tune for my Cordelia song," Rosie said. "She says she used to play it when she was a little girl, and it fits the words beautifully. It would be a shame to waste it." Vinny put the banjo down. "What about A Midsummer Night's Dream? Still Shakespeare, but easier to understand." They wouldn't like that at all." Charlie, terrified of being told that he had to play Puck, decided to support his father. "All those weavers and tailors, they'd think we were laughing at them." Vinny nodded. "Good point." The Tempest? But Pa was not to be moved. He had decided on King Lear, and that was that. Gertie and Aunt Mag shook their head at each other, but knowing Pa as well as they did, they made no further efforts to dissuade them. Arabella got off her piano stool and came to join the company. "King Lear is quite a substantial play, isn't it?" she asked innocently. "I remember my governess telling me about a performance she saw in London. She said it was terribly long, but the actor who was Lear, I think his name was Macready, made it bearable. She didn't sleep longer than 10 minutes the entire time." Pa, shocked to the core by the idea of anyone sleeping through King Lear, but delighted to be asked about his favourite subject, brightened. "It is indeed one of the longest, dear lady, although Hamlet is longer. I've taken the liberty of making a few cuts and alterations, so we run for about an hour." So that's when they decide that they're going to do King Lear. And just to cut to the end of the story, what happens is that they decide that that's what the play that they're going to do. And this is just a little bit about the final performance. The curtain swung open, and there was a sharp intake of breath. Anyone well acquainted with the tragedy of King Lear might have wondered at the opening scene, but the Ancaster audience were dazzled. And Pa, Aunt Mags and Gertie swept onto the stage. The candlelight made the artificial diamonds, rubies and emeralds on the costumes glitter as if they were real. And Goneril and Regan launched into the song that Pa had written for them. Having declared their undying love, "O father dear, by name of Lear, how much we do adore you. We love you best above the rest, believe us, we implore you," they sank into deep reverential curtsies. Now, of course, Shakespeare didn't write any such things, and one of the audience says, Miss Twilfit's sister gave a deep sigh of satisfaction. "I do like a good song," she remarked. "Never knew that Shakespeare fellow wrote music." So I had a lot of fun with it, and I was able to get in a lot of Shakespeare references as well. And I was thinking that it's really a fun way of thinking about an introduction, if you like, to Shakespeare. When you've read his stories and read the plays and seen them, to have a think about doing something rather similar. And you might decide to rewrite a little bit of the play, or you might decide perhaps to write a pre-scene so that something that happens before the play actually takes place. So, for example, if you were going to write a pre-scene for, let's say, Macbeth, you might have Lady Macbeth demonstrating something about her character. The important thing to do when you're writing a pre-scene is to keep it so that it's not totally incomprehensible or impossible, that there's just enough of the characters involved. So I don't think that Lady Macbeth would be found knitting bed socks, but she might be found looking at a list of kings and queens and making some comment about about her interest in the historical facts of dynasties. And if you were writing a pre-scene for, let's say, Midsummer Night's Dream, you might have the bottom and the weaver and the other actors talking about a different play other than the one that they perform in Midsummer Night's Dream. And perhaps you might even like to have a go at writing the play that they didn't do. And I think that would be a really interesting thing to do. Or alternatively, you could be like me and you could write a pre-scene for King Lear, and you could have a think about how the sisters were seen together and how Goneril and Regan and Cordelia, how they would talk to each other if they were having a cup of tea or whatever, perhaps a glass of mead and a piece of marchpane, that's marzipan, which was very popular in Elizabethan times. So have a go at writing a pre-scene, and I would really, really love to see it. Okay, thank you.